Welcome to the Genealogy radio show, the radio show that's keeping you in the loop. And our show airs from Radio Corcabashkin in Kilkee in wonderful County Clare. And today we're really lucky to have an interview with Sean Murphy, a genealogist, historian, lecturer and author who has just published online a digital version of Herbert Wood's Guide to the Records deposited in the Public Records Office of Ireland, which appeared originally in 1919. So that would be the centenary of this. And welcome, Sean, to the Genealogy radio show.
Morning, Lorna.
Morning, and welcome to our show today. And I know Owen and Garvin and Alva have some questions to ask you on this fascinating source.
Hello, Sean. What we want to start with was, who was Herbert Wood and why is he important?
Well, Herbert Wood was an Englishman, but his father actually was born in Ireland, and he landed up in Dublin in the 19th century, working in the Public Record Office of Ireland. And his greatest achievement was to publish that Guide to the Public Records of Ireland in 1919, 100 years ago.
Wonderful. And but we would have thought, Alva?
Weren't the Public Record Office and its contents were destroyed in June 1922?
This is true, and indeed some would say, why bother with a guide to a record office which has been entirely destroyed? However, when we look more closely at it, we find the loss was not total. And Herbert Wood himself, after the terrible event, he didn't sink into depression. He pointed out that the copies and abstracts and little bits and pieces that had survived made it worthwhile putting the place back together again in some way.
Fantastic. And I mean, there must be a wealth of material in that guide. I mean, what type of material are we looking at, Sean?
Well, now, the oldest records were court records dating from Norman times, and it went through all kinds of state papers, and from our genealogist point of view, the most terrible losses were the wills, pre-1901 census records, and many Church of Ireland parish registers. So that was the bulk of the loss, but again, not everything went.
And are there any of those Norman manuscripts, can they be recreated through transcriptions or anything like that? Is that possible?
They can indeed, and that was Herbert Wood's great strength. He knew the records from beginning to end, but his particular specialty was the medieval period. So after the event, he listed those which had been published and abstracted and pointed out where there were copies and other repositories, giving quite a good bulk of surviving material.
That is fantastic. That is a wonderful guide then to recreate the past and so on. And for family history, and what kind of collections have you come across that have been found that are interesting to a family historian or genealogist?
Well, as I say, as well as the records that have survived in fragmentary form, such as pieces of census and copy form, we have to be grateful that Herbert Wood and his colleagues have not succeeded in taking in all the records, so that, for example, the 1901-1911 censuses had not been taken into the four courts by 1922. We're so glad for that. The births, marriages and deaths from 1864 onwards, they were outside the general register office and survived entirely intact. And then we have Griffith's valuation records. So these are collections which have survived in entirety, in addition to the fragments and the copies of records in the PRO which we can access.
Oh, so that's fantastic. So it's not true to think that everything burned, everything was gone, everything was destroyed, because that is given as an excuse of people not being able to go back further in the 19th century.
Pessimistic.
Yes.
We shouldn't be too pessimistic. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Lorna? It's terrible that we lost the 1821 to 51 censuses. It'd be marvellous if we had them. Still no, there are other records which would enable us to get some information, Catholic parish registers, the valuation records, etc.
That's very true. And I mean, how many of these records survive in other countries is also very dubious. It's an argument I've had that many other countries would have experienced bombing during World War II and so on, and World War I. I presume that there would be archives and records destroyed because of war. So they simply don't survive at this time either.
Indeed. And I think it should be a matter of shame for us that the British, and whatever else they did wrong in this country, when they departed in early 1922, left us this state-of-the-art record office, and we ourselves destroyed it during the Civil War in June 1922.
Yes. So there's a lot going on there with 800 years of records. Also, I would say, Sean, that many of the records sometimes when you're looking at family histories, many of the records went back with the landlords too. And during the 1850s, when they departed Ireland, their records would depart back with them. I have come across copious amounts of family histories, and the papers were never in Ireland in that last 70 years anyway.
This is so true, and this is something Herbert himself came to realise, except he was committed, as were his Victorian colleagues, to the centralisation of records. But after the destruction in 22, he noted with some regret, the centralisation was the cause of the losses of many records. And what you say is true. Many records, landlords' records, records of the Lords Lieutenants, etc., were not in the record office and have survived to this day in various other repositories. It's up to us now to digitise them, carry out digitisation in order to make them accessible.
And digitisation is happening at an enormous pace. It's hard to keep pace with the born digital and the digitally rendered material that we have on record today. Every day there's more and more and more materials being uncovered, which add to your guide being absolutely terrific, even to go through, even if people were to look for various aspects of those, that the documentation exists in the first place. So you must be very proud of the work indeed.
Indeed. And I'm just trying to remind people of Herbert Wood and his great work, because these things are cumulative, you know. If each generation was trying to build what's gone before. And Herbert Wood left us. It was a terrible loss, but we can put it back together again. Now, Herbert didn't know anything about digitalisation on computers, obviously, but they provide us with an incredible means of making material available. Like you will probably know yourself, in the bad old days, you'd have to take the train or the car to Clare to look at a record. From California would have to hire someone or else take the plane over. Now, in the comfort of your own home, all over the world, you can access these records.
That has its risks as well, where people can make what they like of records and not understand the actual complexity of the records themselves. I would urge people to seek professional advice where possible as well.
So true. We professional genealogists and academics should not be put aside. We're there for expert guidance, contextualisation, so on and so forth, to help people who don't have training.
Yes, because trained researchers are very slim to nil on the ground, but having them is invaluable, as I have found with my own crew here, with Owen and Alva and Garvin. Really, really helpful indeed. They help me every day, and I would be lost without their contextualisation and their ability to look and search and find when I haven't got the resources, sometimes time resources, to do that. So I know Garvin has a question for you. So,
hi, Sean, on the topic of digitizing documents, could you tell us a bit about the Beyond 2022 project in Trinity College?
Okay, this is a project I'm not involved with myself, but I'm looking at it with interest, as I think historians and genealogists are. A group of scholars in Trinity College have decided to use state-of-the-art digitization and 3D technology. It sounds incredible. They're going to create a virtual copy of the destroyed public record office before 1922, and then they're going to populate it with digital copies of as many surviving copy records as they can find. The idea is you would check into Beyond 22, you find yourself going into a virtual copy of the building as it was, and going around looking on the shelves and taking down digital copies of various records. It sounds almost too good to be true, but they're well advanced, I can tell you that, and they have good support.
Sounds fantastic, Sean, and I look forward to it with interest. And I know that they have been digitising a long time now in Trinity College, and we have some wonderful projects come from them already. So we've done some shows on their projects. I think they were responsible for the Down survey maps in some part, and the Circle project is coming to mind as to some of the things that they're involved in as well.
Indeed, the Down survey and the Chancery records are the proof that they can achieve these things. So they're going on there to cover a much broader range of records.
And what about the depositions, Sean? Are they responsible for those as well?
They are indeed. As I say, these have come on stream, 17th century records from the period of the Great Rebellion. They're very, very useful indeed.
Fantastic. So are you going to publish some pieces on this as well as the catalogue? You're giving some talks on this area?
That's true. A couple of people like yourself have asked me to give a little talk on wood and its work, and pointing out that work needs to continue on today using the benefits of modern technology. So I'll be doing that this year. And
a book, I hope, Sean, because I mean this is really worth a book of some description because of a man who would have given so much of a listing, an annotated bibliography, a listing, a catalogue is worth its weight in gold when you have a completely destroyed record. So could we persuade you to write a book on it?
Well, I'd be well open to that. I mean, it's only 3 years from 2022, which is the anniversary of the actual destruction of the records, and if I don't get the job, somebody else, I'd imagine, is going to republish Wood's book pointing to this great new digitized online recreation of the records. Well, could I mention that I do have a PDF copy of my republication of Wood's Guide with a preface essay. Now, just very briefly, if you want to get it, go to Google and Google Sean Murphy ePubs, and you click on the link, which will get you a 30 megabyte file of the whole of Wood's Guide with an explanatory essay by myself.
And your own website is absolutely superb. My students were devouring it yesterday and they found it absolutely brilliant. They were going through it. It's very, very helpful. The information you have online is absolutely superb, and a credit to you, Sean. And we'll be putting in a blog piece on that as well later on next week, because it's, we don't just want to put a link to the radio show. We'll have loads of questions where people will want to know where all your wonderful resources are. But we were sure you do want to be credited with those resources, because that's very important also,
Indeed.
So,
thank you for that,
no problem at all. Sean, it's been delightful talking to you. So have you anything to add? Could we ask you just a little bit, what happened to Herbert Woods, the man, his life? Tell us a little bit.
Indeed. Well, you can imagine there was a lot of the press, historians, scholars and genealogists looking at the smoking ruins of the Public Record Office in June 1922. Wood had by that stage been appointed the head of the PRO. Now, he didn't just pack his bags and head back to England immediately. He stuck around for a bit, and even when he went back to England in retirement, he continued to produce articles, and his message was not, as you might think, bitter and pessimistic. It was, it's a terrible loss, but we haven't lost everything. Let's put it back together as much as we can. So I think our generation has a duty with our much more, shall we say, efficient tools of digitalization to complete that work.
Also, it's about collection care as well, which I've done a great deal of work on in the past, and how people mind and look after their family histories and genealogical records. This isn't just a big institution that this happens to. This is every house, every person whose grandmother dies and they throw all the stuff into a skip. They say, sure, we can digitize those photographs. We don't have to keep the originals. We don't have to do any of that. We'll have it on computer. We have it forever. And then the computer crashes and all the family trees are gone. Everything is gone. It's about how we take care of our own personal little legacies as well. So there's a lesson in it for all of us, not just in relation to the PRO. And I know my students here from UL are going up next week to the National Library and the National Archives to gain their readers' tickets. And they won't just want to look at everything online. They'll be engaging in the formats that are print and traditional format, and it'll give them a clue as to how to look after such valuable information.
You're right. There's the National Archives and then there's the individual family archives, and both must be taken care of equally.
Can you advise my team here on what to look at next week when they're going up to the National Archives and the National Library?
Well, the great thing is I'm a great believer in digitalization, but I think you've made the point as well that if you've never ever seen or carefully handled the original record, you're going to miss something. So on their visits, they're going to get hands-on experience, I think most for the first time, of records, and they'll also be able, of course, to satisfy, this is not yet online, I need to actually physically look at this as well. So try and see as many original records as possible.
Yes, and even in the prison records, and is there anything particularly they could look out for each archive, the National Archives? What would you suggest they look at?
In the National Archives, my advice to my own students is, when you have the chance and somebody's not giving an introduction, take a turn around the reading room and look at the reference guides on the shelves. You won't take everything in one visit, but it's a big one. Realize what they have later.
Well, this is their first visit to the National Archives and the National Library, so that's fantastic. And would you say the same for the National Library as well, or should they take a trip down to the Genealogical Office, which is a few doors down from the National Library? Is that open to them?
That's right. Well, I would defer to the staff there because, as you know, the National Library isn't just about books; it's also about manuscripts, and the manuscript department, as you know, is separate. So
yes.
Whatever you've arranged, I would imagine the staff will both show them the main library where the books, etc., are, and also will introduce them hopefully to the manuscripts down the road in 2 Kildare Street, where the great Genealogical Office collection is held.
I know I have found the reference information on that to be absolutely wonderful for beginners, Tom's directories, all these type of information that really help and inspire us to become better researchers and better at generating solid, valuable information. So, Sean, wonderful to talk to you today, and thank you very much for your time. We'll certainly be giving a great deal of energy to your wonderful work on this, which is a real legacy to family historians and genealogists. And what great work, as usual. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Lorna, for letting me speak to people about this woman's work.
Brilliant. So I'll say goodbye now, Sean, and you mind yourself, okay?
Okay, bye-bye, Lorna.
Now, listeners, that's an absolutely wonderful source today, where we've looked at Herbert Wood's recreation of the past, a past lost legacy, which will be invaluable for the researchers to recreate. Well, it's one thing to know that this wonderful archive burned down, but what went, what disappeared, what can be recreated, how do we regain fragments of the past, what does it mean to digitise it, and our wonderful view into a 2022 project where people can embrace the new technologies and use them for a common good to be able to transform the past into a meaningful present and future when looking at the legacies for their family histories. So, listeners, this show will be podcast and it goes out and repeat on Sunday and so on. If you have any queries and you want to contact us about things to research and things you may be interested in, please do contact me at irishroots@clansandsurnames.com and put in the subject line radio show and so on. And we will give that due consideration and see what we can do on that. And thank you very much for listening.